In the heart of West Africa, in a land where ancient rivers carved pathways through dense forests and the drumbeats of rituals echoed across hills at night, there lived a man named Kweku. He never knew the colors of dawn or the brilliance of stars that glowed above the thatched roofs of his village. Yet from a young age, Adumasa was a place where the living never truly lived alone. The people believed that the ancestors, spirits of mothers, fathers, warriors, and elders, walked among them, guiding and watching. The people of Adumasa practiced the ancient ways. They poured libations to the ancestors. They danced to the drums that spoke to the unseen. And it was during one such ritual, on a night heavy with drums and chants, that Kweku, blind from birth, would suddenly see. His sight, given only in the moment of possession, would reveal hidden secrets, long-buried sins, and warnings that could not be ignored. This is his story, the story of a blind man who, staining the clouds with a coppery glow, and the air was thick with the smell of roasted maize and wood smoke. Children ran barefoot along the dusty paths. The ritual had been awaited for weeks. The elders had chosen the date carefully, guided by the alignment of stars, the cycle of the moon, and the whisperings of the diviners. It was said that during the Akum, the spirits could reveal hidden truths, heal the sick, or offer warnings about dangers to come. Every household had prepared offerings, bottles of palm wine. She was proud of her son, yet also worried. Whispers had reached her ears, whispers that some of the elders had begun speaking of Kweku's strange gift. They wanted him present at the ritual tonight. They said perhaps the ancestors had chosen him. Perhaps his blindness was not a curse at all, but a vessel for something greater. But his mother feared what that meant. A slow, steady rhythm carried on the wind, calling people from their huts. Soon, the narrow paths filled with men, women, and children, all moving toward the great clearing beneath the Irako tree. The smell of burning herbs, pungent and sweet, filled the air as the herbalists cast their mixtures into the flames. The drumming grew louder. Who took his hand firmly and led him through the crowd. Though he could not see, Kweku felt the heat of the fires, the vibration of the drums in his chest, the press of bodies around him. As the music swelled, some began to tremble and shake. The spirits were near. Kweku stood still at the edge of it all, his hands clutching his carved drum. He felt his heart beating faster. The crowd fell into silence. Come forward, son of Adumasa. Come and stand before the ancestors. Guided by Kojo, Kweku stepped into the circle of firelight. The heat licked his skin, his mind loosening from its moorings. The elder sprinkled palm wine on the ground and raised his staff high. Spirits of Adumasa, he called, if it is your will, take this vessel. Speak through him. Then sharper, clearer. Faces flickered before him. Faces he knew, faces he had never seen, faces from long ago. For the first time in his life, he saw. But because for the very first time in his life, something had broken through the eternal blackness he had always known. A world was unveiling itself, not through his blind eyes. He saw the circle of villagers standing around him, their eyes wide, their mouths parted in awe. He saw the flames of the fires, their tongues twisting and reaching into the night sky. Some backing away, others drawing closer. He sees, someone whispered, their voice trembling. But then the light shifted again, and Kweku's vision plunged beyond the realm of the living. His hand lifted and pointed toward the crowd. People drew back, fearful of being named. His hand moved, shaking, before settling on a tall man standing near the edge of the gathering, hiding it from the community. You thought the ancestors would not see, but they see all. A wave of shock spread through the villagers. The golden stool was no ordinary object. It was said to hold the spirit of the community, a sacred relic that connected the living to the ancestors. Weeks earlier, it had mysteriously disappeared from its shrine. Relentless, he turned to Kweku, who still knelt trembling in the circle. Spirit, what must be done? He asked. Kweku's body stiffened, and his voice came again, leaving only the crackle of the fires and the sound of hundreds of breaths held in fear and awe. For a long moment, No one moved. Then Nana Kwabena stepped forward, his face grim. "The ancestors have spoken," he declared. His voice shook slightly, though he tried to hide it. "We must obey." The villagers erupted into murmurs, some fearful, some angry, some whispering prayers, their eyes darting between the unconscious figure of Kweku and the trembling man accused of betraying the ancestors. Flames from the fires cast restless shadows across the circle, as though the ancestors still lingered, watching closely to see what would be done. For a time no one dared to move, his voice low, but carrying across the circle with the force of command. "The spirits have spoken. They cannot be lied to, nor deceived. If they say you have taken what was sacred." Two strong men, both warriors of the village, stepped forward at the elder's command. They seized Botang by the arms despite his protests and dragged him into the circle of firelight. The elder declared, "You will lead us to the place where the golden stool lies hidden. If you speak true and no such thing is found, you will be clear to blame." Adumasa would not sleep easily that night. Inside his hut, Kojo laid Kweku upon a woven mat. The blind man stirred faintly, his lips moving as though he were speaking in a dream, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire and the occasional groan that escaped Kweku's throat. Then, as the first pale light of dawn crept through the doorway, Kweku's eyes fluttered open, relief flooding his face. "You are awake," he said softly. Kweku's lips moved again, dry and cracked, and at last sound escaped him. "I saw them," he whispered, his voice raspy, his voice gaining strength with urgency. "No, this is not finished. They showed me more, things I cannot yet speak of, things that will come if we do not act quickly." His words trailed off in a silence as exhaustion pulled him back into uneasy sleep. By the time the sun rose fully, the entire village had gathered once more at the Irako tree. Botang, the word of the ancestors, spoken through Kweku, carried greater weight than any denial. Nana Kwabena stood tall before the assembly, his staff gleaming in the morning light. Botang, under the eyes of the entire village, he led them beyond the fields, to a place where the earth had been freshly disturbed. There, buried beneath layers of soil, wrapped in cloth, perhaps even a sacrifice of his own blood to heal the wound he had opened. Kweku's words had already sealed his fate, and though the stool was restored, unease remained. No one would sleep without fear of what punishment the ancestors might send. The air was heavy with tension. Even the birds seemed quieter, and the elders gathered to decide the form of atonement that must be carried out. As evening approached, the Irako tree was once again surrounded by the entire village. Fires were lit, as though it bore the mark of betrayal. Before it, offerings had been laid, bowls of palm oil, calabashes filled with wine, live fowls tied at the feet and squawking in protest. His fate in the hands of the ancestors. Nana Kwabena, the chief elder, raised his staff and spoke in a voice that carried over the crowd. "The earth has been defiled," he declared. "The ancestors demand cleansing. Tonight, blood and water will flow upon the soil, and the covenant will be restored. Botang has confessed to his crime, and his punishment shall serve as sacrifice." The man who had spoken with the voice of the ancestors could not be ignored. Nana Kwabena frowned, uncertainty flickering across his stern features. "Kweku," he said, his voice carrying a note of caution. "Why do you come here? You have done enough. Rest and leave the matter to the elders." But Kweku shook his head slowly. His lips parted, and his voice emerged hoarse but unyielding. "No, I must be here. The spirits are not done with me." A hush fell over the gathering. The drummers, who had begun their slow, steady rhythm. More must be done. His words sent a ripple of unease through the villagers. Nana Kwabena tightened his grip on his staff. "What more is required, spirit?" he asked cautiously. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. The ancestors had spoken through Kweku once before, and their words had proven true. Could they risk ignoring this new vision? Nana Kwabena raised his hand for silence. "Then it shall be done," he said gravely. He signaled to the elders, who moved quickly to prepare the ritual. dripping onto the earth before the stool. Boteng groaned, his body shaking, but he did not resist. The blood seeped into the soil, dark and glistening in the firelight. Then, as Kweku had commanded, 2 children were brought forward, their hands carrying the bowls of river water. They poured the cool liquid gently over the stained earth. Rhythmic hum that filled the clearing with reverence and dread. When it was done, Nana Kwabena struck his staff against the earth. "The covenant is restored," he declared. "The ancestors are appeased. Let the sickness pass us by." The villagers echoed his words, their voices trembling but hopeful. But Kweku did not rise. He knelt still, his hands pressed into the wet soil, his body quivering. His blind eyes rolled upward, and he spoke once more, his voice faint but chilling. "The earth is cleansed, but the sickness is not yet gone." Although the golden stool had been restored to its shrine, and the earth had been bathed in both blood and water, a shadow lingered over Adumasa. People moved through the village with 4 smiles. Kweku spent most of those days confined to his hut. His body had grown frail, weakened by the possessions that had racked him. His mother tended to him faithfully, feeding him broths and pressing cool cloths to his forehead. Kojo sat by his side, speaking softly to him of the outside world, describing the golden glow of the sun on the thatched roofs. He had seen, not merely in dreams or vague impressions, but truly seen. The faces of his people, the glint of fire on the sacred stool, the twisted expression of guilt on Boteng's face. It had been overwhelming, terrifying, and yet wondrous. Now, robbed of it once again, he felt hollow, as if something vital had been stolen from him. He found himself longing for that unbearable gift. Alma was gone. The next morning, 2 children fell ill. Their bellies swelled, their eyes grew dim, and they wailed through the night until their voices faded into silence. Soon after, leaping from hut to hut like fire feeding on dry grass, panic gripped Adumasa. Families shuttered themselves indoors, fearing contact with neighbors. Mothers refused to let their children play near the river. Men stood guard at the edges of the village, convinced that strangers carried the plague, and they drove away any traveler who came near. The once bustling square fell eerily silent, broken only by the cries of the sick and the keening of mourners. It was then that the elders summoned Kweku once more. He resisted at first. The drums began their slow beat once again, echoing into the twilight. As the rhythm rose, Kweku felt the familiar trembling seize his body. His breath came in ragged gasps, and he cried out, his voice transformed once more. "The sickness is not of this village alone," the voice thundered. "It comes from beyond the northern hills, carried on the breath of traders." The villagers leaned forward, straining to hear every word. Nana Kwabena raised his staff. "Tell us, spirit, what must we do?" Kweku's body convulsed, and his voice grew deeper. "For division will feed the sickness. The guilty must humble themselves before the innocent, and the innocent must forgive, lest bitterness fester like rot. Seek also the roots of the forest." Kojo caught him before he struck the ground, holding him close as the villagers erupted in a storm of voices. Some rejoiced, clinging to the hope of healing. Others muttered in doubt. "Kojo, I saw them again. Faces light shadows. They are everywhere. Watching, waiting." His voice broke, and his sightless eyes filled with tears. "Why me? Why must it be me?" That forest was not merely a place of trees and shadows. It was the dwelling of old spirits, some benevolent, others vengeful. It was said that hunters who wandered too deep never returned, or returned half-mad, muttering about eyes in the darkness and whispers in the leaves. Yet there was no other choice. The sickness spread swiftly, sparing neither child nor elder, pouring libations to the ancestors. The old women wailed and sang, their voices weaving prayers into the morning air. The men carried charms of protection, strings of cowrie shells, and amulets blessed with ash and herbs. The forest loomed before them as they left the village. Its edge rose like a wall of green shadows, the air cooler and damp with the scent of earth and moss. Birds screeched from hidden branches, and the rustle of unseen creatures stirred uneasily in the undergrowth. With each step, the sounds of the village faded, replaced by the deep, humming silence of the wild. For Kweku, the journey was unlike anything he had known. He walked with one hand resting lightly on Kojo's arm, the other clutching a carved staff that had been pressed into his palm by the elders. Every sound reached him with startling clarity, the crunch of leaves beneath feet. The forest itself seemed alive, breathing, watching. Hours turned into days. The group traveled deeper, following the faint guidance of Kweku's visions. At night, they made camp around small fires. "The path forks," he whispered hoarsely. "One road leads to water, the other to fire. We must choose water, though the fire tempts with an easier way." His words unsettled the group, but they obeyed, trusting his visions. At dawn, they found the fork, a trail leading toward a dried riverbed and another marked by charred stumps where lightning had struck. They took the water path, the place of red earth and white stone. They pushed through the last thicket and emerged into a small clearing. The ground here was unlike any other they had seen. The soil was deep red. As the prayers filled the clearing, Kweku fell to his knees, his hands reaching out to touch the earth. The moment his fingers brushed the soil, a vision surged through him, blinding, overwhelming. He saw the sickness like a black cloud sweeping through Adumasa, devouring children, silencing elders. He saw the plant before him glowing with a light that pierced the darkness. But not without care. If we anger the guardians, the cure will turn to poison. The group exchanged fearful glances, but they knew there was no turning back. With trembling hands, they prepared to harvest the sacred leaves, every movement heavy with the knowledge that unseen eyes watched from the forest shadows. His eyes darting to the edges of the clearing where the shadows seemed to flicker unnaturally. Owusu and Kwame flanked him, their weapons ready. His blind eyes turned upward as though he could see the spirits gathering. His hands pressed to the earth trembled with unseen energy. "They are here," he whispered, his voice shaking with awe. But as the chanting of Nana Kwabena continued, they took form, tall, slender beings with faces hidden by veils of light and darkness. Their eyes glowed faintly, not with malice. His chant rising in pitch. He poured the last of the palm wine onto the earth before the stone and struck the ground with his staff 3 times. The sound echoed unnaturally loud, reverberating through the clearing like a drum. The guardians moved closer, their forms shifting, their whispers growing louder. Kweku felt the voices press against his mind, filling him with visions. He saw men who had once tried to steal from the sacred place, hunters who had thought the plants mere herbs. He saw them consumed by shadows, their bodies vanishing. "Because our people suffer, grant us your gift, ancestors. Let us heal those who cannot rise from their mats. Let us restore life where death has taken root." A long silence followed. The guardians swayed like flames in the wind, their eyes unblinking. Then, one of them stepped forward, its form clearer than the others. A tall figure, robed in white mist. He murmured, but only with care. The hunters lowered their weapons, their hearts pounding. Kojo helped guide Kweku forward, and together they knelt before the plants. Kwame hesitated, eyeing the lush cluster of plants. The thought of taking more, of ensuring abundance, flickered in his mind. But when his hand twitched toward an extra stem, a chill ran through the clearing. The guardian's eyes flared, and the air grew unbearably heavy. Kwame dropped his hand instantly, sweat dripping from his brow. Carefully, reverently, their bodies trembling with relief and exhaustion. Then Kojo let out a shaky laugh, gripping Kweku's shoulder. "We did it," he whispered. "By the spirits, we truly did it." They wrapped the sacred plants carefully in cloth, treating them with reverence, and prepared to leave the clearing. As they stepped back into the forest, the white stone gleamed faintly behind them, carrying not only the cure for the sickness, but also the burden of the spirit's warning. The journey back from the sacred clearing was long, but it felt different than the journey into the forest. When at last the forest began to thin and the familiar smell of smoke from Adumasa's cooking fires touched their noses, relief broke over them like cool water. As they stepped into the village, and the elders bowed their heads. Even those who had doubted, the skeptics who had called Kweku's gift strange, or even dangerous, stood silently, unable to ignore the gravity of the moment. The sick were gathered in the center of the village near the great baobab tree, their bodies weakened, their eyes dim. Some coughed softly, others lay motionless, too weak to lift their heads. The air was heavy with the scent of sweat and fever. It was there, under the branches of the ancient tree, that Nana Kwabena prepared the ritual of healing. He spread a mat of palm fronds on the ground and laid the bundle upon it. With hands steady but reverent, he unwrapped the cloth, revealing the plants. Their leaves glowed faintly. His voice rose and fell like waves, and the crowd joined in, their voices weaving into a low hum that filled the air. The drummers, seated on the edge of the gathering, struck their drums with slow, steady beats, the sound echoing like the heartbeat of the earth. With great care, Nana Kwabena ground the leaves of the first plant into a paste, mixing it with clean water and herbs. The boy's breathing deepened. His eyes opened wider, clearer, and his hand, which had lain limp at his side, twitched before curling weakly into a fist. A cry rose from the mother, but each showed signs of strength returning. The coughing eased, the fevers lessened, the light of life flickered back into their eyes. The village, once heavy with despair, now pulsed with hope. Yet, if greed or arrogance grows among us, the sickness will return, and it will be far worse than before. Nana Kwabena looked at the young blind man, his eyes filled with both admiration and sorrow. Then it will be your task, Kweku, he replied, to remind them. The ancestors have chosen you as their voice. The drums quickened, and the people danced in relief and thanksgiving. Children laughed, elders lifted their arms in praise, and the night sky above seemed brighter, as though the stars themselves joined in the celebration. The air was alive with life again, and the future of the village depended on whether they remembered the lesson of the guardians. The days that followed the healing of Adumasa were filled with celebration. Laughter returned to the village. The children who had lain pale and coughing now chased one another in the dust. The plants work, do they not? And we are well. Perhaps the spirits are not so fearsome after all. Kweku, though blind, felt this shift in the air as surely as one feels the coming of storm. He knew the balance was beginning to tilt. The first sign came quietly. One morning, Nana Kwabena went to the shrine to pour libation, but the ground around the ancestral stones was disturbed, as though someone had come in the night and taken something. He frowned, kneeling in the dirt, and felt the traces of torn cloth and snapped twigs. His heart sank. That evening, he called the council together and spoke sternly. Someone has gone against the covenant, he said. The plants were a sacred gift, meant to be used with reverence. If any among you has stolen them, or sought to return to the forest without the blessing of the ancestors, speak now, before the spirits themselves demand payment. But no one spoke. Eyes shifted, seeking more than was given. They thought themselves hidden by the darkness, but the spirits see even where the moon does not shine. Their greed has broken the covenant. A murmur spread through the crowd, shock and fear mixing with anger. The accused men, Kwame, Adu, and Minsa, stood rigid, their faces pale. One spat on the ground and cried, "Do not listen to him. They were given as a bridge of mercy, and you have trampled upon it with greed. Now the balance must be restored." The three accused men cried out, trying to flee. Kweku collapsed to the ground, gasping, his body drenched in sweat. The three men lay silent, their chests rising shallowly. They were not dead, but their strength was gone. Their eyes clouded with fear. Nana Kwabena stepped forward, lifting his staff. "The covenant has been broken," he declared, "but the ancestors are merciful still. We must atone." He was not merely a blind man who saw during possession. He was a seer, chosen to speak the words of the ancestors when others grew deaf. His blindness was no curse. It was a veil, and always demanding respect. The people would tell his story for generations, whispering it at firesides and teaching it to their children. And in every retelling, the memory of Kweku, the blind seer who had seen beyond the veil. Kweku himself grew old. His hair turned white like the morning mist, his face lined with the gentle folds of age. Kweku would smile softly and say, "The ancestors look like truth itself. Sometimes they are gentle, sometimes they are stern, but always they are ours. They walk with us, whether we see them or not, and they watch whether we honor them or forget them." One quiet dawn, after a night of ritual, Kweku lay upon his mat. The village was still, the drums silent. "For I go where all must go. Keep the covenant. Remember that the gift of life is never yours alone. It is always shared with those who came before." With those words, they built a small shrine in his honor at the edge of the village, near the path into the forest, so that anyone who entered might pour libation and remember his warning. And long after his passing, when droughts came, when sickness threatened, or when pride grew too strong, the people of Adumasa would gather beneath the baobab and retell his story, the story of the blind man who could see. The elders say it carries his voice. They tell their children, "Listen closely. Can you hear it?" That is Kweku reminding us, the ancestors walk with us still. And so,